My name is Rory Houlihan. I ran for U.S. Senate last spring, 2016, to stop the ticking time bomb, so I could put our economy on track for a bright new day. Instead of all things ending well, I lost, and I'm not running. But the ticking time bombs are still here, and if not more so. Let me educate you on the ticking time bombs and give you the rest of the story. Part 15b. So, what is limited government? Let's apply Jeffersonian strong, effective government of the people, by the people, for the people reasoning to economic, most efficient reasoning. Um, to get the most limited government is the one that is the most efficient and the most effective form. The most limited government is the government that does more for less. An important concept. Effective and efficient government does more for less. So we should always strive to do more for less. How do we get the most efficient and effective government, which would be the most limited? So I've looked to periods in which our government was under its heaviest strains for guidance on what is an effective and efficient government. Only the most efficient and effective government forms would survive under strain. The first period has to be the Civil War. Nothing tried our country more than the splitting of the Union. The next period would be the Great Depression, and followed by World War II and the Cold War. Let us take a look at those periods. I based my statements on the book 1858, Abraham Lincoln, Jefferson Davis, Robert E. Lee, Ulysses S. Grant, and The War They Failed to See by Bruce Chadwick. With the election of James Buchanan and the Dred Scott decision as the Supreme Court present, the South slave industrial complex got everything they wanted. I know the always lower prices, always lower wages, always poor and poorer, always worse and worse business model that creates or chases poverty. You know that one? Dred Scott decision extended slavery for all practical purposes to every state in the United States. The slave state complex, ELP, political forces, was clearly large and in charge from day one of Buchanan's election. Yet, Buchanan is seen as one of the worst and most ineffective presidents ever. He was the president who came up with the idea of the golden ring to create a super slave state that included the southern states, Mexico, the Caribbean, and Cuba. Buchanan thought that free white men would just accept his ELP vision. But Buchanan's and the slave state complex heavy-handedness instead galvanized Republican support and opposition across our country. You cannot enslave the black man without also enslaving the white man. Abraham Lincoln became as real as Lincoln saw, where the slave state ELP complex would leave our country, and made that ELP path known during his senatorial campaign against Douglas. As I pointed out, that the two-tier labor market is bad for all labor because the secondary, mostly minority, slave, or illegal labor market always undermines the primary, mostly white, educated, or experienced labor market. So, if you enslave one group, you enslave all groups. Something that Martin Luther King understood very well. By the end of Buchanan's term, the U.S. was in recession, and Buchanan stood by as 8 states seceded from the Union, saying the federal government had no power to stop. This is the country Lincoln inherited. Weak, divided, suffering economic decline, Little wonder why Buchanan is considered the worst president ever. Something that the Donald should keep in mind. Sometimes you win, you lose. The 5 months of inaction by Buchanan gave the Confederate States plenty of time to organize. Because of the need to control slavery with force, the South had a well-developed military force. Young white males were drafted to the state's militias at the age of 12. So the, the Southern fighting forces were taught everything as far as tactics and things you needed to know. The Tennessee was undefeated until left out in the ice storm before the Battle of Richmond, Kentucky. The South had the best generals, Lee, Bragg, Stonewall, and Forrest. So how come the South lost the war? Has it ever occurred to any of you that the states' rights folks are blaming your great-great-granddaddy for not being man enough to beat those damn Yanks? If you study the Civil War history, you soon realize that this was not the reality at all. Perryville, Kentucky, Bragg wins the day's battle. So why did General Bragg retreat the next day, marching clear across Kentucky to eastern Kentucky, and then halfway across Tennessee back into the center of Tennessee? That's a very long way to retreat. Well, the Tennessee state legislature pulled his supplies, first to the eastern side of Tennessee, and then back to the warehouses. General Bragg and his army was forced to chase his supplies because of the legislature of Tennessee yanked Bragg's supplies. After this teaching moment, General Bragg fought a defensive war. This is not a way to win a war, folks. The Civil War broke down to just being a test of the two forms of government: the Articles of Confederacy, states' rights, and states being supreme, and a constitution, federal rights, and the federal government being supreme. As in the Bible, Mark, a house divided cannot long stand. Perryville wasn't an isolated incident. States' rights undermined the war effort time after time, actually starting early on. There was a law passed that exempt large landowners, slave owners, from serving in the military, making the Civil War for the Southern man a rich man's war and a poor man's fight. The wealthy legislators, after all, they were sitting at home, safe, warm, and comfy, and the poor hard-working guy became cannon fodder and was malnutritioned. No one endured more hardship and fought harder against overwhelming numbers than the Southern fighting man, the great-great-granddaddies of Southern folks. There is a reason why Thomas Jefferson, as president, never did an about-face to states' rights and the old Articles of Confederacy. He knew very well that the Confederate decentralized government was a weak government. After all, Thomas Jefferson was part of that government too. There is a reason why that the Pledge of Allegiance was instituted after the Civil War. You know, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, not just for some. Just can't wait to find out the rest of the story. 15C, how states' rights was financed on the backs of our farmers. Coming next. You have a good and blessed day.